Hello there, and welcome to today's episode of Stand Up, where I have got the great Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist and best-selling author David Cay Johnston of Rochester Institute of Technology now. That's where he is teaching, because he's never quitting. He joins me at about 37 minutes into today's show. If you want to skip ahead to that interview, thank you to everyone who joined me at last night's Stand Up Happy Hour Hangout. I host 2 a week, Mondays and Thursdays. We had a great time last night, a little over. Well, we did about 2.5 hours. I was there from 8 to 10:30. We had, 60 people there, I think, at one point, and lots of laughs and lots of very serious discussion as well. Heavily focused on what is happening in California with this regime and the immigration crackdowns, how it's making us feel, and where we are headed in the future. A lot of ominous predictions, a lot of thoughtful conversations, and plenty of ideas that people were sharing about how to navigate it all. So I highly recommend that you stop by the Hangouts. You can keep your camera off. You're not required to participate in any way. You could just be in the chat. You could just listen to it. And if you want to listen to last night's, there is a link in today's subscriber email that you can go back and listen to it. Also, to get us started here, I'm going to share Gareth Sever's song that he wrote at the end of the Hangout. Dude is such a talented musician, percussionist, dancer, singer-songwriter, classically trained, and we love him. He's a great, great guy, and he'll be at the Hangout. He'll contribute in all kinds of ways during the conversation, but he takes notes, apparently, the whole time for like 2 hours, and then he puts together a song about what happened. It's not always perfect for the podcast because some of the things he says are inside jokes, but I think last night's works perfectly. They usually do. I should always play them and share them with you. There was this amazing moment where Dr. Scott Williams was talking about his frustrations and the way that he saw things, his truth, and then our friend Vicky went on her own little journey of explanation on how she thinks about things. She talked about her 108-year-old aunt and why she finds it her responsibility to pass on what she saw, what she experienced, and how she fought to her young ones. And so it was wonderful and fun, and Gareth makes pretty scary, ominous sounding events sound somehow a little bit lighter. And so here it is, Gareth Sever. Buckets and Boards is his amazing performance group with his partner, Matt. And, well, here he is from last night to get us started.
I think it's prescient to mention we might be past the point of no return. Disappearing anyone into detention. The signs are all pointing to a nation ready to burn. Time is not on our side. Who knows when the tipping point could turn the tide? But the oncoming oppression, bird flu and recession, these overlapping horrors just bringing on depression. I need a new way of looking at things. Maybe this country's just a notion of something that never could have been. And maybe it's okay that it might all go away. It wasn't really what we were told when it was sold to us anyway. I gotta clear up my confusion. I've come to the conclusion. I'm asking, what is my place in this world? I want to do everything I can to help out every single boy and girl. You know, the progressive lament is maybe it'll never be possible to achieve the universally beneficial things we all believe. Damn it, it'd be so easy to relieve the suffering around us. We can plainly see, I mean, whatever it is whatever it is. In Espanol, S-O-C-K-S, but that ain't it. If you truly give a shit, something's gotta give. I really gotta believe it. In the face of what's going on, the despair can be overwhelmingly strong. Stay true to the blood of Vicky's ancestors. Don't give up the fucking fight. In whatever way you can, do everything you know is right. Don't give up the fucking fight. Don't back down. Stand up for what's right. Let it go for a moment and sleep well tonight. Then wake up in the morning and step into the light and fight.
Yeah, there you go. Garrett Sever, everybody. So talented. Buckets and Boards. Go follow them on Instagram. Go hire them. Go see them if they are in your town or performing on your cruise ship. Such a talented guy, and we always appreciate his contributions. Love you, Garrett. Thank you very much. Speaking of awesome listener contributions, our friend Kevin Richburg, who is also often at the Hangouts, a big contributor of the conversation there, with another ominous warning, his daily reminder, at least, that there's only one thing that matters. Take it away, Kevin.
The only story that matters is that Trump is temperamentally unfit to be president. When asked if he sees protests spreading to other American cities, he replied, "When they spit at people, you know they spit. That's their new thing. You know they spit and worse. You know what they throw at them. And when that happens, I have a little statement. When they spit, we hit. They get up to them this far away, and then they start spitting in their faces. That happens. They get hit very hard." When asked what the bar is for deploying Marines on American soil, he instantaneously replied, "The bar is what I think it is." The only story that matters is that the most powerful man in the world attempted by childish decree to criminalize spitting with the instantaneous punishment of assault and battery by the military on American citizens. No other story matters. Trump should not be president of the United States because he belongs in a third-grade timeout corner being forced to think about what he's done.
All right, there you go, Kevin Richburg. Always amazing. Always a little hyperbolic. Just a little bit, because there are, of course, other stories that matter, but it's important to be reminded of the top one every day so that we don't let it slip away from our own reality. All right. Well, the Marines are headed to Los Angeles. How about that? So the Marines are there, and the Trump administration, of course, deployed this battalion of 700, along with an additional 2,000 National Guard troops to do nothing, it would seem. Everybody is now making fun of the order because they're lying around and they're not seemingly looking too comfortable what they're doing, just sitting there for the most part because, of course, this is not a huge and violent protest like we've seen around the world and around the U.S. As somebody tweeted yesterday, whether you win or lose in an American sporting championship, there is more violence and looting and vandalism. Governor Gavin Newsom said this is provocation, not just an escalation. In an interview with the New York Times, he said this is intended to sow more fear, more anger, and to further divide. The Pentagon did not make clear why it would need more National Guard troops in the city. The New York Times says the state is also sued to block the use of National Guard. And Democrats expressed alarm about the arrival of Marines, of course. American military troops are supposed to be used inside the U.S. only in the rarest and most extreme situations. And even as the regime has deployed the armed forces against their own people, the situation in L.A. has seemingly already calmed down. The police and small groups of protesters clashed yesterday in Little Tokyo neighborhood where LAPD made arrests and used tear gas to disperse crowds. But there generally seemed to be fewer clashes between protesters and police officers. So far, the National Guard, like I said, appears to be mostly lying on the ground while they're resting and eating a cup of soup. And so it's obviously a fluid situation, and it may have escalated since I'm recording today's episode this morning on Tuesday, June 10th, and it's spreading potentially to other cities. But the question about deploying federal troops is being debated by legal experts around the country. Can he do that? This is the question. Is it all legal? Well, the New York Times asked a professor of Southwestern Law School and former Air Force Lieutenant Colonel named Rachel Van Landingham. And she said, well, the founders wanted to prevent the president from using federal troops against we the people because of the way the redcoats used warrants to do whatever they wanted in people's homes. But National Guard troops are local citizens. They live in their communities, so they're allowed to help with police work until they're federalized, which is what Trump did last weekend. Then they become indistinguishable from active duty military. All they can do is defend federal workers like ICE agents and federal buildings like ICE detention center. Well, that's what she says. All they can do, but they're going to do whatever they want. Potentially, they're going to do whatever they want. I think that's fair to say. So the California Guard and the Marines can't contain the protests, the Times asked. She says, well, not unless the president invokes the Insurrection Act. Well, he's going to. That is the prediction. That law lets troops police our streets to suppress insurrections and help execute federal law in the face of rebellion. And Trump said yesterday that they were insurrectionists. So, what counts as rebellion is something that no one's going to be able to define. What counts as an insurrectionist? Clearly, we don't agree on that. And more news on the protests. In Santa Ana, California, city officials said that federal agents used tear gas, pepper balls, and rubber bullets against protesters who threw bottles and rocks. Protests spread to cities including San Francisco, Dallas, and New York. They remained largely contained with brief clashes between demonstrators and law enforcement. Union leader David Huerta was released yesterday from detention. Union members across the country had marched in support of him after federal agents arrested him at a protest on Friday. So that was a quick reaction and a quick retreat, it would seem, from the regime. Immigrants now being cautious about going to work and school because they fear ICE sweeps, according to the Los Angeles Times. On social media, people are posting a lot of misleading photographs and conspiracy theories to stoke outrage toward immigrants and political leaders, principally Democrats, according to one New York Times article. Waymo, the driverless taxi company, is limiting services in San Francisco after protesters set fire to 5 of its cars. That is just a quick roundup, mostly there from the New York Times. And so I want to know what you're seeing, what you're reading, and what you're hearing, and how do you know what sources that you're reading, seeing, and hearing are trustworthy. I hope that you can trust me here. I'm always happy to make corrections, admit when I'm wrong, and have the credibility of over a decade of this in doing it, but that doesn't make me perfect either. So by all means, let me know how we can do better, how I can do better. All right, what other headlines and other things happening in the world do I need to tell you about, talk about? Well, yesterday, this panel of vaccine experts that old worm brain had at the CDC forever, well, he fired them. He made significant decisions, this panel, about who receives immunizations, including vaccines for children. This is a huge, huge story, so other things do matter, Kevin, right? Because this matters a lot. I think it's fair to say. In a sharply written open letter now, dozens of employees at the National Institutes of Health have accused the government of undermining the agency's work and endangering people's health. A little more news from the regime. A group of Democratic-led states suing to challenge the reversal of Biden-era effort to ban devices that turn semi-automatic rifles into makeshift machine guns. Good luck. Democratic states continue to try to do something about guns, and many times they do in their states, sometimes to be overruled by the Supreme Court, of course. The Mad King is asking federal job applicants to describe their allegiance to administration policy in an essay. He's the first president to do that. This is really just right out of the authoritarian playbook each and every day. The Smithsonian said it retained authority over personnel, including at the National Portrait Gallery, whose director, the Mad King, says that he fired. And starting today, nationals of 12 countries, including Afghanistan, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen, will be barred from entering the United States after a Trump administration executive order went into effect at midnight. Members of the D.C. Bar Association overwhelmingly rejected the efforts of Brad Bondi, brother of Attorney General Pam Bondi, to lead one of the largest, most influential bar associations in the country. The vote was like 90 to 9%. So that's really good. Thank you, DC Bar Association. That guy was no good and would have created a lot more bad things in connection with the Department of Justice. A federal appeals court on Friday paused a lower court's ruling that had required the White House to allow journalists from the Associated Press to participate in covering President Trump's daily events and travel alongside the peers from major news outlets. It's a really important case, and we should be continuing to watching press freedom everywhere. Apparently, the Trump administration will pay a $5 million settlement in a lawsuit over, quote, wrongful death of Ashley Babbitt, who was killed by a U.S. Capitol Police officer after storming the Capitol on January 6th. Transportation Department on Friday, by the way, began the process of relaxing fuel efficiency rules for passenger cars, and the Trump administration And the Trump regime's transportation department, in their efforts to make the air worse and climate change happen faster, they began the process of relaxing fuel efficiency rules for passenger cars and SUVs, saying that the last administration had exceeded its authority when setting the standards. In a statement, Sean Duffy, the Secretary of Transportation, former Real World reality show star and congressman, accused Joe Biden or Biden officials of making flawed assumptions about electrical vehicle adoption when crafting the rules, formerly known as corporate average fuel economy or CAFE standards. I've talked about them with experts for years, so I don't think they did make flawed assumptions. I think they knew exactly what they were doing. And yesterday, our Mad King apparently signed 3 new executive orders, and one including and on Friday, apparently Trump signed 3 executive orders, including one aimed at spurring production of flying cars. So at least we're going to have flying cars soon, except for the part that I don't think we will. Although I am obsessed with all those videos of people operating like one person little choppers and drones, and they call them flying cars. Are they? I don't know. It's debatable. Russia launched almost 500 drones and missiles at Ukraine, the largest drone barrage of the war, according to Ukrainian officials. The leader of NATO urged all member states to spend more on their military or, quote, learn to speak Russian. Apple had its big event and revealed new design for its software. So not necessarily as many new devices, but changing the way their operating systems look and work. And how about this for another huge story? Firearm deaths of children rose in states that have loosened gun control laws since 2010, according to a new study, which is a pretty big deal and which is something that needs to be mentioned all the time. Guns are the leading cause of death in the United States for people ages 1 through 17. And this study is from the Journal of American Medicine Association, JAMA, and it's worth looking at and talking about and covering, so I wanted to make sure that I mentioned it. All right, well, those are the headlines that I've got for you from yesterday. Now let's get to your news clips. It's time for the Clip Show. Soundbites. Let's start with Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, who, like our friend Kevin Richburg, is trying to remind us of what's important all the time. Here he is.
Can also be true that everything that's happened in the last 7 days between the fight with Elon Musk and now the deployment of the National Guard is probably also a distraction from the main story, which is that right now Donald Trump is trying to pass probably the most unpopular piece of legislation that he will attempt to move through Congress in his first term. He's going to throw 15 million people off their health care in order to fund a massive tax cut for the wealthy. It's going to add $2 trillion to our deficit. We're probably going to head into a recession. And so I do also think he's probably doing everything he can to try to get the entire political world to be talking about anything other than a piece of legislation that's going to fundamentally change this country. So, yeah, we have to point out the danger of what he's proposing to do in Los Angeles while also keeping our eye on the ball, which is a bill that's going to transform our economy and ruin a lot of lives.
All right. Really good reminder. Very important reminder. That's Senator Chris Murphy yesterday on Morning Joe. Let's go over to CNN where Karen Bass was on with Pamela Brown and Wolf Blitzer. I thought this was helpful.
Trump border czar Tom Homan has now walked back some comments suggesting that you or Governor Newsom, for that matter, could face arrest if you obstruct federal authorities. How do you respond to Homan, and do you have any concerns potentially about being arrested?
No, I'm not concerned about being arrested, and I can't imagine an opportunity. I can't imagine a situation where I am going to interfere with federal agents. So it was something that was inappropriate to say. And what I am going to focus on is bringing our city together. We cannot allow ourselves to be divided. We are an international city. The diaspora from just about every country in the world lives here. And so this is a time to stand together. And it's also a time to appeal to the administration. Please dial this back. This was not necessary. It has created a sense of fear. It feels deliberate. It's like, how can I deliberately create chaos in a city? Nobody needs that right now.
Have the protests, Mayor, impacted police responses to other parts of your big city?
No, I do not believe that is the case. Again, I will reemphasize that what you are watching is taking place on a few streets downtown. Obviously, it is terrible what you are looking at, but I don't want people to leave with the perception that the city of Los Angeles is experiencing citywide unrest. Nothing could be further from the truth.
I want to share the CBS poll. It shows 54% of Americans approve of the Trump administration's program to deport illegal immigrants. A minority, 46%, disapprove. Are Democrats out of touch on this issue?
Well, I think if you did the polling in Los Angeles, I'm not sure it would be that way, considering we are a city of immigrants. And then people might approve that policy. But do people really approve the federal government coming in and seizing power from a state and from a city? So I drill down a little further on that poll because I do not believe that Americans support the federal intervention in a city takeover or a state takeover.
Right. And just to be clear, the poll talks about American sentiment as it pertains to illegal immigration, but it does say that the majority of Americans, we should note, disapprove of sort of some of the tactics that are being used. To your point, Mayor Bass, thank you so much for joining the show.
All right. Thank you so much for having her join the show and letting me play it. All right. Now let's go to yesterday. It's House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries at the Daily Democrats press conference. I guess here he is with a bit of a statement.
We will not be lectured by Donald Trump and anyone in the Republican Party about issues of law and order. Not a single one of them. Donald Trump promised to lower costs on day one. Costs haven't gone down. They're going up. Inflation is going up. Donald Trump lied to the American people. You know what he did do on day one? He pardoned hundreds of violent felons, criminals, who brutally assaulted police officers and attacked the Capitol on January 6th. That's what Donald Trump did on day one. The hostages weren't released on day one like he promised. He lied. The war didn't end in Ukraine on day one. Donald Trump lied. Costs didn't go down in America on day one of Donald Trump's presidency. He lied to you, the American people. You know what he did on day one? He pardoned hundreds of violent felons who brutally beat police officers. That's the insurrection. And so the notion that Donald Trump and his minions, his sycophants here in the House of Representatives or in the Senate, who are nothing more than a reckless rubber stamp for Donald Trump's extreme agenda, are going to lecture America about issues of law and order, get lost. We're not feeling you at all. You have zero credibility.
All right. There you go. Hakeem Jeffries. Trying to make it plain and make it clear. Yeah, they have lost the higher any ground they had to talk about the rule of law or law enforcement or any of that based on January 6th and their votes and stances and comments and pledges to our dear leader on it. Let's get to the top cop in California. It's the Attorney General there. His name is Rob Banta. He put out this statement yesterday.
On Sunday, the protests had mostly dissipated, and streets were mostly quiet and calm. Since Trump announced his plan to deploy troops, the situation on the ground has escalated quickly, with unrest growing overnight, causing highways to close and putting people in danger. This wasn't the case on Saturday or Sunday morning. This was not inevitable. We'll never know what might have been had the president left our state and local authorities to continue the important work they were already doing and were more than capable of doing. What we do know is that what we saw yesterday happened after the president's unnecessary, counterproductive, and, most importantly, unlawful order. An order that abused the federal government's authority and violated the 10th Amendment and federal law. An order that skipped over multiple rational, common sense, strategic steps that should have been deployed to quell unrest and prevent escalation. As a result I, in partnership with Governor Gavin Newsom, are suing President Trump and asking the court to set aside the president's unlawful action federalizing the California National Guard.
All right. Well, that was from yesterday, so I'm not sure how much has transpired in California since he put out that statement. Let's head over to the ladies of The View, a rare clip from the ladies of The View, because, they're just talking about Civil War on ABC News. So I thought it was interesting. Let's check in with Whoopi and Sunny Hostin. I believe the clip opens with some sound from the mayor that we just heard, Karen Bass.
Troops is a dangerous escalation. It's not about public safety. There's clearly no plan, and there is clearly no policy.
Yeah, the Defense Department has the U.S. Marines on high alert right now. Now, is it warranted, or does this sort of escalate the situation? I mean, whatever happened to states' rights? I thought that was what you do, because you tell the state, this is what we're thinking of doing. You don't just send people in. You don't just send troops in. But what do I know? I've never run a state. But I don't really, when you come in and when you go into the donut shop to look for people and you're dressed in tactical gear, you're creating an issue. You're creating a problem. You want people to come. You've scared them. Even when people are supposed to be there, when they come to talk to the judge, you're arresting them right after. What is going on here?
I think what really matters from sort of a long view here is the fact that he is militarizing and deploying the Guard for the purpose of policing Americans' protest activity, right? Our freedom of speech, our freedom of assembly. And there's a very big, stark demarcation between military troops and law enforcement, public law enforcement, civilian law enforcement. Right. And you are an army turned inside to police its citizens can cause chaos, fascism. And so I think that's the way, and civil war. Yeah. I think that's the way we need to look at it, because deploying the National Guard is supposed to be a last resort. But what this president is doing is that he's saying he's going to deploy them anywhere in this country where there is protest. So that is certainly not a last resort use of military troops.
There you go. All right, ladies of The View, bantering it about. I thought that was interesting and wanted to share it with you. They have good conversations there. I don't really listen or watch that show, but I saw that clip and enjoyed it and thought it was important. Let's go to Congresswoman Nanette Berrigan, who is from California there, and so she has a lot of credibility on this, and here is her read on it all.
They know where the serious criminal offenders are, and they send folks out to get them. They don't just go massively round up people. Think about this, Jake. U.S. Marshal was picked up. U.S. citizens are being picked up. I mean, this is not an effort to really get criminals. It's an effort to see, let's see who we can just sweep up along the way. And why are they doing this? Because this president said he was going to deport millions of people, and the numbers have not been adding up. You know why? Because there aren't that many serious criminal offenders that are the millions of people that he wants to round up. So now he's getting our neighbor and our friend and the people that you all know, people that we've been here, that have been here for decades. And that is, I think, the outrage that you're seeing happening across this country. And it's not just in Los Angeles. Clearly, we've seen protests in other parts of the country, against what is happening. What the president's doing, though, is a complete escalation. I think it's a violation of the law. I think it's an abuse of power.
How is it a violation of the law? I mean, ICE is allowed to deport people.
No, I'm talking about overall what he's doing. He's now sending in the National Guard.
The seizing of the National Guard.
I mean, now he's sending the Marines in. They're threatening to arrest the governor. I mean, now they're arresting Congress members. I mean, this is a fear tactic to try to get people to not do their jobs. And even members of Congress, who it's written in law, you can go do the oversight into these detention centers. Right. They're not allowing it to happen.
Right now, I saw.
All right, there you go. That was from CNN yesterday. A little Jake Tapper in there as well. And now let's listen. Just a quick clip, the trigger alert. This is our Mad King, our tiny authoritarian leader, answering the question, what crimes has Gavin Newsom committed? It's about 10 seconds of his voice coming at you.
A crime has he committed? I think his primary crime is running for governor because he's done such a bad job.
He sounds very high energy and smart and great there in that clip. All right, let's listen to his top thug, Tom Homan, who is dressed, by the way, as a Cuban revolutionary. He's now wearing like wartime gear for his cable media hits, and it's really preposterous and embarrassing, cringy.
Is everyone that has been arrested by ICE agents have a criminal record like those you've described?
Absolutely not. And I said from day one, January 20th, we will prioritize public safety threats and national security threats. However, we will enforce law. I may prioritize my family life over my work. Doesn't mean I ignore my work. We're going to force immigration law. We've been honest about that from day one, especially in sanctuary cities. Well, we can't get the bad guy in the safety and security of a jail. They release him to the street. Well, we got to go to the street and find them. And when we find them, many times they're with others. Others that are in the United States illegally, may not be a criminal target, but guess what? If ICE is there arresting that bad guy and other aliens are there, we're going to arrest them. That's what sanctuary cities get. They put us in the neighborhood. They force us in the neighborhood. This is what happens.
All right. Wow, that guy is a real bad POS. Here is Gavin Newsom, who Republicans and the Trump regime are doing everything they can to escalate to a responsible and tough leader. I think that's my read, at least. Here he is yesterday responding on YouTube. I think he was talking to, I don't know, some YouTuber, a big YouTuber.
He's not for peacemaking. He's here for war. He wants a civil war on the streets of America, not just here. He's testing the boundaries by nationalizing the federal guard. Heck, his own great Kristi Noem was just a year ago sitting there with newsmaker Sean Hannity saying it's outrageous that Biden is considering nationalizing the guard in my great state. Kristi Noem, the same Kristi Noem, saying, what about state sovereignties and state rights? And where the hell is Hannity now? Where the hell is Kristi Noem? They're out there just singing the siren songs of chaos, trying to sow chaos and putting our democracy at risk. These are acts of authoritarians.
Yes, acts of authoritarians. And how do you react to authoritarians? Well, here is one way, a guy who many people, including myself, mistake for a famous actor who is the son of Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn. We all thought this was Wyatt Russell making this impassioned speech to a whole bunch of uniformed officers, armed uniformed officers. And I got that wrong yesterday on social media. It's not him, but it is just some white guy. And I think it's important when white people put themselves on the line now more than ever. I've tried to do it myself for most of my career in all kinds of different ways. And I think this is exactly what we need. This is exactly the type of person we need. And I really liked what he had to say here and thought it was important. So I thought I'd share that with you right now. Again, this is just some dude in LA screaming in an impassioned and I think empathic way to uniformed officers who were standing guard outside a federal building.
Feel tough with your assault rifles and your sticks. You should be standing here with us. You're on the wrong side of history. We know you got a job to do, but you took an oath to the Constitution, not to the fascists in the White House. Think about what you're doing now. Think about what this means. Coming into our community. Peaceful fucking community. People working their jobs. They send in men in military fatigues. Weapons of war into our communities. And you stand here and you allow it. I am sick and tired of it. You should be sick and tired of it. You think any of these people in the White House sending you these commands give a fuck about you? Not one of them do. They laugh at you. Our president laughs at you. He calls you fools. He said the people who died overseas in the military were chumps. That's who you're defending right now. Every last... Think about your place in history, ladies and gentlemen. Ask yourself when you wake up tomorrow. I don't know if you have kids. Ask yourself the future you want for your children. Is it this? You can answer me. Is it this? Do you feel good about this? You're tough behind your fucking masks and your fatigues and with your weapons, but how do you feel on the inside? This is our fucking community.
All right, there you go. That's how it sounded. Obviously, he wasn't dumb, but I am. And so I thought that was worth sharing. And finally, some laughs for you. Let's check in with the CBS Late Show, which is still on. And Stephen Colbert is still able to get away with everything. He's not pulling his punches. And I think that's important to measure as well. Here he is from last night.
You know me. There's a lot of darkness out there, but I'd like to start tonight's show with something positive. Did we find anything? No? It's Monday. What are you going to do? Oh, wait, here's something positive. We all get to be with each other. In here, all of us in here, out there. And I just want to say, I would advise us to stay together just until the troops leave. Because you see, this weekend, after a series of ICE raids prompted not huge immigration protests in Los Angeles, President Trump ordered the deployment of 2,000 National Guard troops to L.A. Oh, Lord. Really? Is it too much to ask to have one weekend where I don't have to Google when count as martial law? Today, Trump went after the protesters.
The people that are causing the problem are professional agitators. They're insurrectionists. They're bad people. They should be in jail. Thank you.
Yes, all the insurrectionists should be in jail. And I'll tell you, folks, we have plenty of room because I just pardoned 1,500 of them. And I pardoned them all, and they still haven't brought me the pelt of Mike Pence. Guys.
All right, there you go, Colbert. Last night, I wish I had time for more, but I've got to get going and share my interview with David Cay Johnston with you right now. He, of course, is a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter back in his days at the New York Times. He is a best-selling author who has written several books about Donald Trump. Interviewed him back in the day. He is the founder of DC Report, which is a great news website you should check out. And he's now at the Rochester Institute of Technology, RIT, author of 4 bestsellers, 4 other books, former staff writer at the New York Times, and so much more. We're always very happy when he joins us here. This was live yesterday on YouTube. You can find it at youtube.com/standupwithpete. While you're there, subscribe for free. And I can't do this show without your paid subscriber and bring on guests like David Cay Johnston. So please sign up now or pay more anytime you want at patreon.com/Pete Dominic, where you can also listen to last night's Hangout. Did I mention that? If you're a subscriber? Yeah. Okay, let's do it right now. David Cay Johnston. Here we go. Look who I have, everybody. The great David Cay Johnston, the Pulitzer Prize-winning writer, journalist, and so many other things, professor, now at RIT, we should say, and we're all very excited whenever you join us. You're still teaching. You'll never retire. Why did you plan for retirement if you knew you were never going to retire?
Just in case. Just in case. Sorry about that.
That is your retirement bell, by the way.
You got it. Yes. It's my don't forget you have to be on with Pete.
Awesome. So glad to have you here. And lots that I wanted to talk with you about. The obvious and the most imminent seems to be what's happening in California. I'm reading authoritarian history types and other, I think, really smart people that are analyzing this. It's hard to know what the strategy here is, but I just wanted to get your general reaction to hearing the National Guard be called in for the first time since, I think, like Kennedy or LBJ over segregation.
Also, over the objection of Governor Gavin Newsom, who controls the California National Guard unless it's federalized, and Mayor Bass. There's no need for the National Guard. But this is exactly what Stephen Miller, the Minister of Hate in the Trump administration, wants. Trump believes wrongly that he can suspend habeas corpus. Habeas corpus can only be suspended by Congress in response to an insurrection or invasion. Neither of those apply, but there's a legal problem here. There's a legal doctrine known as the political question doctrine. So in a filing with the courts, if the president says X, the courts must assume, unless there's been a trial, that what the president asserts is true. And so Trump says there's an invasion.
Right.
Under this doctrine, the courts would not stop Trump from taking actions that would be appropriate if we were actually being invaded. Now, it's a doctrine. It can change. You might think the Supreme Court concerned about its own position, might think it might work to change it. But the smartest member of the court and the one clearly most deeply steeped in the Constitution, Justice Ketanji Jackson Brown, the newest member of the court, she has been pointing out the court's been changing the rules to benefit Trump, something known as the shadow docket. And that's where the court, without a real hearing, rules on things. And when Trump needs a ruling, the Republicans on the court take care of Trump. And when getting a case quickly resolved would harm Trump, oh, no, you have to go through the full process. Right. They're manipulating the system. But we should be very worried about what's going on in L.A. And to the extent that people throw rocks and bottles and engage in aggressive action, they're helping Donald Trump. And by the way, unlike most protests where people do something like this and they get a relatively minor charge brought to them that often gets dismissed, I will not be surprised in the least if the Justice Department seeks 10-year, 20-year prison sentences for those who stand in its way, because that's what dictators do.
That's what dictators do is a phrase that we're hearing a lot, certainly as it relates to this. So he's called in the National Guard, and he's creating, I think the governor of California even said this, he's manufacturing this. What you would like to see is complete nonviolent protesters, because you think that violent protesters and the imagery that gets created and generated, whether it's real or not at this point, creates the fake justification for the federal government to come in heavy-handed with the stormtroopers like Andor.
Yeah, people who've been trained in Gandhian and Martin Luther King, which is derivative techniques, should go there and not try to attack the authorities, who in some cases are undoubtedly making righteous arrests. The problem is they're making lots of non-righteous arrests. But simply lying down and going limp and saying you got to carry me away is one thing. And the purpose of nonviolent response is to provoke. Let's be clear about that. You want to provoke the government because you want to create a moral issue. But when you start throwing rocks and bottles and whatnot, now you're not doing that. You are engaging in criminal behavior. And that's what Trump wants. Because, I said much earlier, February 26th, Donald declared himself our dictator. And I've been warning people, Pete, as you know, since at least 2011. Oh, hell yeah. The oldest thing I can find I wrote, that Donald believes that he should be our dictator, that's what is right, not just of America, but the whole world. And he said, what did he say a month ago to the Atlantic magazine, less than a month ago? I run the country and the whole world. So you have to understand his mindset, that he thinks what he's doing is entirely
explains a lot. I mean, if you do understand that mindset, it explains so many of his actions and why he seems to think, and so far has proven, he gets away with almost everything.
And a lot of the law is on his side, as it should be for a president. The problem is the framers of our Constitution, they knew we could end up with a madman in the White House. They did things, but the method they came up with to deal with it, impeachment, has never worked. We've had 4 impeachments plus the one interrupted of Richard Nixon because he resigned to avoid it, and no convictions. Right. And it's because the 2/3 requirement just doesn't work. Now, you noticed in South Korea, they had a president who declared martial law. Not only did they remove him from office, but who is the new president of Korea? It's the legislator who jumped the fence so that he could go in and vote the impeachment articles.
Oh, I didn't know that's who. I did not know that was I saw who won the election there and which party was in. But that's a really interesting point. So I need to talk to you about several other issues. So quickly, just on we could spend a lot of time on these crackdowns, could spend the whole time talking about it, of course. But what led to these were the days and weeks before it and the images we saw all over the country. Again, hard to prove what's what and who's who. But we saw non-uniformed federal officers snatching people off the street, away from immigration courts, off of construction sites and farm sites, at the job, tearing them from their families. Americans this week and the weeks prior learning the translation of what it sounds like to say, what about my kids? My kids are in school. Mi hijas. And this imagery leads to these protests. I mean, what do you make of the legal strategy with taking these people off the streets, picking them up at immigration courts, and of course what we saw to several of them, just put it on planes and flown away without any kind of court hearing for anything that they may or may not have done. The worst is for visas.
Yeah, you know what distinguishes somebody we think committed a robbery at the neighborhood bodega and the person who's a criminal? Due process. You're only a criminal after you've been convicted, after you've had all your due process rights. And they don't care. They believe that they're in the right and that if you didn't commit this offense, you committed something else. And the other question you'd ask is, why are they doing this? Why are they going to administrative law judges? Those are the ones who hear asylum claims. They are not part of the judiciary. They are part of the executive branch. That's why they're called administrative law judges. Why are they going to them and saying, please dismiss this case? So you show up for your case because you're compliant. The judge dismisses it. Now you don't have a case and they can arrest you because you're illegally in the country. Talk about a conspiracy. It's right out in the open, conspiring to make it possible. And so why are they arresting mothers taking their kids to school, people praying in church, guys hanging around a Home Depot hoping to get day work? Because there aren't hordes of criminals, rapists, and murderers, as Donald claimed. People who come here illegally, guess what? They try really hard not to have contact with the police. They're very compliant. And many of them pay taxes. Many of them have Social Security withheld from their paychecks for accounts that aren't theirs, so they'll never benefit from that. And, where I live here in Western New York, the New York Times just had a big piece about Wayne County, one county over from me. We are one of the biggest apple-growing regions in the country. There's a nice little cartel of 5 big families who run the apple business. They don't need the government to fix the prices or give them subsidies as we do with all the grain grown in the Midwest, the soybeans and the corn and the wheat, because they have this nice little lawful cartel. And not technically legal, but they run it in ways that nobody's going to go after them.
Right.
I don't know who's going to harvest the apples.
I know. I mean, you're seeing and hearing that in upstate New York, where I was just from. I'm from there, up in Syracuse, and farms across the country. Which is why this issue is never one that farm or the big ag lobbied. They always lobbied for immigration reform, and every comprehensive immigration reform, many of which were signed down or co-authored by Republicans, they had resources, funds for more courts, more judges to process more people whose citizenship wasn't any kind of question. I wish we lived in a country who awarded people, even if they were here undocumented or they overstayed their visa. If you were here and you worked every day in the hot sun doing something for 2 years or 5 years or whatever, guess what? Yeah. Not only do you get all the rights of citizenship, but we're going to give you a medal because you work so hard. You're such a great citizen.
Well, and contrary to this image Trump has created, when I was a little boy, I lived on my grandmother's orange ranch in Orange, California, right in the city limits. There were all these orange groves everywhere.
Wow.
And when harvest time came, as a little boy, 5 years old, kindergarten, I would go out at lunchtime and I'd eat my lunch with the guys who'd come from Mexico to pick the oranges. And there were usually one or two of them who knew enough English we could communicate. They had families. They missed their families. They wanted to get their work done and get paid so they could go back to their families in Mexico. They were all obviously desperately poor and not well educated. And I didn't know they weren't well educated back then, but I realized looking back on it. But there's this utter disrespect because this is about creating a white supremacist, male, misogynistic, dominated culture. And so there are a couple of things people should pay very close attention to right now, Pete. One of them is, as Professor Tim Snyder teaches, no voluntary obedience. Don't say, oh, I better do this or they're going to come after me. Second, don't engage in any illegal conduct, anything that's provocative to the authorities. And if you're not brave enough to stand up, then stand behind people who are.
Couple of really good lessons, of course. I've got to ask you about all this that's happening in the streets, and then we're also hearing around immigration. I've got to get your take, of course, on the feud between Elon Musk and Donald Trump. But I saw Senator Chris Murphy, I think, on TV. I like him, from Connecticut, talking about whether or not this is, and it's always a fair question, this is all a distraction from the disaster around the big, bad bill. That would be Trump's potential only piece of legislation. He put all the cards on that one, even though Republicans wanted to pass it piecemeal. And now Elon Musk leaves. He's trying to sink it. Trump has got to be concerned about it. Send in the National Guard. Distraction. Now nobody's talking about this horrible piece of legislation. Question to you is, how should media be covering the legislation that will affect our lives far more than even what's happening in the streets of LA and other cities that could create a police state?
You know, for all the times on your show for years that I've criticized my former employer, the New York Times, and other news organizations, there's actually very good coverage of this. The New York Times, the AP, Washington Post, et cetera. But it has to have attention. And this bill, first of all, should not be allowed by the Senate parliamentarian under what are called reconciliation rules, because it's not just a spending bill. It is a major policy change bill. Secondly, it has this provision that would make the federal courts ineffective. They would lose their contempt power in cases where there's a lawsuit saying Trump is operating extra legally. And without contempt power, there's no enforcement. Republicans need to be confronted about this. If you're so worried about the debt, if you're so worried that you think firing tens of thousands of federal workers is going to save money, by the way, it's not saving money, and we're going to find out at the end of the day, it cost us a lot of money. It was counterproductive. Then why are you going to borrow $2.4 trillion more, $2.4 trillion more, to give tax cuts to people who have more money than they can possibly spend?
Yeah.
This makes no sense whatsoever. Unless, of course, what you plan to do is replace our democracy with an oligarchy. And, 120 years ago, Harper's Magazine was running pieces pointing out, as Louis Brandeis wrote, you can either have highly concentrated wealth or you can have a democracy. President Theodore Roosevelt, a Republican, said the same thing repeatedly. And he didn't attack all wealth. He attacked the malefactors of wealth. That's what's around Trump. There's nothing wrong with being wealthy per se. The problem is people who use that wealth to oppress, to or behave unrighteously. And that's what the Trump people brought. And then finally, we have a president of the United States who is clearly selling pardons. He is pardoning vicious, violent criminals, including a gang leader in Chicago who the police say is responsible for dozens of murders. Not crimes of passion, which we can't do a lot about, but contract murders to prevent witnesses from testifying, et cetera. And he's taking all this money from overseas. And the lesson in that is that our Constitution is unenforceable as a practical matter in many areas. That's something we need to address down the road. Right now, we have more immediate concerns. But we have a criminal in the White House, a convicted felon who's spent his whole life being a criminal, as I've documented in my books and everywhere else. And the system is being overwhelmed. And that's what Steve Bannon said. We're going to just flood the zone, my term, not his. We're going to flood the zone, and journalists and people like Chris Murphy in the Senate will go after this, but they can't go after everything. And people can't keep everything in their head. And look, most people don't read the New York Times, the Washington Post. They get whatever news they have often from sources that ignore and don't tell about what Trump is doing, like Fox and OAN. And they get superficial TV coverage, even if they watch the three networks and the two big cable stations other than Fox. And so a lot of this, there are man-in-the-street interviews I'm seeing where people go, I didn't know that, I don't know anything about it. Members of Congress say, I didn't know that was in the bill. Of course, Congress members always don't know what's in the bill. They count on the leadership. But we have, Donald has turned this into a loyalty to Donald Trump, not a loyalty to the Constitution. So my bugaboo about this, and I have a bias here, I want to be clear, I am the son of a 100% disabled veteran of World War II. I'm a war orphan under the law because they treat you, if you're 100% disabled, your children as if you were killed. And more than 1 million people died for this country, beginning with Crispus Attucks in the Boston Massacre. More than 1 million people have died for the idea of the United States of America. If you as a politician are more concerned about losing your election than upholding our Constitution, you're a coward. You're despicable. We should shame you. We should turn you out of office. Even if I love your politics, we should turn you out of office because you are the problem.
Love it. the idea of the U.S. in my generation, the best thing that we did was USAID. It was the best.
Well, you young guys
did, because in my lifetime, we did a lot of bad things to ourselves and to other people. But every day, USAID and agencies like the Peace Corps and plenty of nameless, faceless federal government bureaucrats were doing and are doing heroic work. But I can't stop thinking, and I do see some people talking about this, and this is a way to get back into Elon Musk and his feud with Donald Trump. Will Elon Musk be remembered? Will anybody keep reminding us that this guy went in and cut USAID on day one, and the people who know best, who work on the front lines, say hundreds of thousands of people, including thousands of children, may have already died of AIDS and hunger and any other number of diseases caused by malnutrition. The great work that USAID did, the one really good thing I knew we were doing every day was that. And that was good for America's brand too. What do you make of Elon Musk and his reputation, or more importantly, those cuts?
Yeah, human beings aren't capable of the most atrocious behavior, whether it's Hitler killing 12 million people, half of them Jews, whether it's Pol Pot and his regime, which on a relative scale to the size of his country was even worse, or Stalin. And that's what this administration is. If you don't get that, they don't have any regard for you. Regard is a word I'm trying to get people to put back in our lexicon, having regard for others. Look it up in the dictionary, folks, so you have a thorough understanding of that word and why it's so important. And here's how it's going to come back to bite us. Two ways. The first is the geopolitical one. Guess who's stepping in to provide humanitarian aid where we withdrew? China.
Oh, Chinese, smart.
China. Smart. And the Chinese think like the Catholic Church. We're here forever. So are they going to invade Taiwan next week? No, they're just harassing the government there on the island of Formosa. But eventually they will get Taiwan back, and they know they will. And they're patient. They don't care. They will get there. But China is the biggest beneficiary on the geopolitical scale of Donald Trump's incompetence and hate-filled administration. But the second area where it's going to come back to bite us is there are a number of pernicious viruses that we have corralled by providing medications to people. The MERS virus from 25 years ago, every third diagnosed case, the people died. We didn't have the massive deaths with COVID-19 because of medicine, because of vaccines and treatments. We had a lot more people die than was necessary in this country. If we had followed the best medical science, we would have had about 200,000 deaths instead of now 1.3 million. Donald Trump was responsible for 1 million people dying. I don't hear that in the news. I don't see the Democrats raising that as an issue. So what's going to happen now is those pernicious viruses that we corralled through USAID, they're going to get loose.
Right.
They're going to get on jetliners, and viruses love to hopscotch around the planet on jetliners. And people watch the closing scene of the modern remake of Planet of the Apes, and where the credits roll, and you'll get it. Just get that movie and just jump ahead and understand.
I don't think I will do that.
Somebody was infected, and see what happens once it gets on jetliners.
I trust it.
So we need to recognize that there's no free lunch. We will pay for these horrible mistakes.
Yeah.
And the Democrats need to do something more than send me a dozen emails every day asking me to donate $3. Come up with a plan and act. Introduce the bills and make a big deal out of it. Call out, and some of the members in hearings are doing very, very well, but how many people watch hearing? Have you watched a congressional hearing in the last week?
Well, I do it for
you do it for a living.
Yeah, but you're right.
I meant that to the audience.
Yeah, no, I mean, they love when I include long clips because they certainly aren't looking for them or watching them. Yeah. What do you make of, or what do you say about this weekend? It's a big planned protest because Trump is having his birthday party, and he's got all the tranks. We've seen these images of tranks rolling across American railroad. It's horrific. It's a scene from the past and our current. It's hard to believe that this is where we're at. He's having a birthday party with all these military. I mean, Jesus, it's like North Korean. It's like movies we watched in the 80s and so on. And so we've got these protests planned for this weekend across the country, no King's Day, and that could get pretty ugly. What are your thoughts about?
I hope it doesn't get ugly. I hope that there are huge crowds. I hope they are peaceful. I hope there are people there who, when there are either agents provocateur or much more likely people who want to make some kind of trouble because of who they are and their personalities. What people who've been trained in nonviolence do is you're supposed to surround those people and not let them do any harm. You can go to the police and say, hey, we need you to take this person out of here. And so I'm hoping there are enormously huge turnouts. It will have no effect whatsoever unless the crowds of January 19th, I guess it was, of 2017.
March 2017, yeah.
Yeah, these have got to be much bigger than that if they're going to have any effect.
Yep.
And people should keep this in mind. The National Weather Service generates about $73 of economic benefit for every dollar we spend on it. Now, how could that be? Well, imagine you're going to build a huge building and you have to have the right weather conditions. Knowing we can start Wednesday of this week, nope, we got to wait till Tuesday of next week because of the weather, is a lot of money for people who are builders and
sure.
And there are all of these things. When are you going to plant your crops? When are you going to harvest the crops? We can't afford to put up enough weather balloons to have first-rate weather reporting, but we can afford to have Donald Trump's birthday party as the American dictator won. And people need to be screaming about this, but do it peacefully. You should be writing short letters to your local newspaper saying, what the hell is going on with you? Why aren't you covering the aspects of this? And we know you have a tiny staff, but there's obvious things going on. People need to be telling their legislators, as we're seeing with Republicans in a number of districts, don't tell me you're only getting rid of people who don't belong on Medicaid. There's almost no evidence of fraud. It's a tiny fraction of 1% of Medicaid by the participants. The doctors and the labs and the hospitals are another story. But don't do that and then claim that's what you're doing when you're cutting Medicaid. You're going to have to cut Medicare if the bill passes. Stop doing that and call these people out as liars and turn out big crowds. And there are journalists who've gone to some of these meetings and they've gotten the names of people and then they've checked them. And lo and behold, they are not, as the Trump White House says, Democrats posing as Republicans. They're actual Republicans who are saying that.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, I was at the big one. There was two of them in my district for Mike Lawler, who's our Republican representative. We had 700 people there. They definitely were not all Democrats. People see that are paying close attention are just by the tariffs alone, before we get to the legislation and how it might cut their health care and so on. Well,
so Pete, the name of your show, I understand Stand Up with Pete is about your being a stand-up comic and a terrific one. I used to warm up crowds for one of the national TV comedy shows. But it also is important that we stand up. We are not powerless. We are not unable to do anything. Don't buy into this notion that, there's nothing we can do. You can't fight City Hall. There's no way to stop Trump. That's not true. If enough people turn out, the Republicans themselves will begin to pick away at Trump and put limits on him. So come, bring your children, if you're my age, your grandchildren or your great-grandchildren of one of those now, and show up, be absolutely peaceful. If somebody's trying to make trouble, go find organizers or the cops and say, we're going to get this person out of here. Be resolute. Things aren't going to change overnight. We didn't get into this overnight. We're not going to fix it overnight. But stand up for America. Stand up for your liberties and freedoms. And those of your neighbors and of those you hate.
I could not agree more, and I really appreciate that. The true origin of the name of the show was when Sirius and XM merged, and the show used to be called Pete Big Mouth. And then my boss said,
terrible name.
I said, change it to Stand Up with Pete Dominick and we workshopped this out. But my whole idea was to use humor and have entertaining discussions to help people learn about important issues. My whole idea was to fight apathy. So it was the tagline I used to use, I should have kept using it, was stand up for something. care about something. And here's the thing. You, as much as almost anyone, if not more than anyone, as a guest on my show, were able to do that, able to explain some of the more boring, mundane issues around tax policy and finance and economics, especially, that we couldn't pay attention to or understand if we were in a classroom. But the way that you explained it, the way you wrote your books, helped fight so much apathy around those issues and really opened my eyes. So I appreciate you always being our professor and our teacher.
If you live in Western New York, tomorrow night at 7 p.m. in Penn Yan on Lake Keuka, I'm going to be speaking at the Baptist Church.
Very nice.
About what you can do to save our democracy. And I'm probably going to be speaking in July in Jamestown, a few blocks away.
So great. Are any of those talks going to be available online if people want to see them?
I don't know. I don't know what the organizers are set up. I leave that to those folks.
I'll find out and share it. I so appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for doing it.
Take care, Pete. Bye, folks.
All right, there he goes. The greatest, the GOAT. Love having him, love talking to him, and very happy that we had another opportunity to have him on the show. You can watch him on YouTube at youtube.com/standupwithpete. And, of course, subscribe while you're there. That's all I've got for you today. I will talk to you tomorrow. Thank you for being here. Take care of yourself, practice self-care, do whatever you need to do to keep sane and find joy, including disengaging whenever possible. And this community is going to be here for you, I hope. So I'm always happy to have you here. Have a good day. John Carroll, take us away as always.